there any obvious place that we could increase taxes to get a lot more revenue? You're allowed to say at this point cigarettes and alcohol.
Well, of course, cigarettes and alcohol, they are always on the cards. But I wouldn't say that that was the obvious thing, and I would say that the obvious thing is actually a reduction rather than an increase. The previous minister, announced 2 years ago that we were going to have a reduction in the corporate income tax rate, and that's designed to make us more competitive because our income tax rate for corporates is higher than most of the rest of the world. So that will become effective on his announcement, along with the provisions which are designed to supplement the income, because it's an in and out, limiting interest and also limiting the use of assessed losses. They're all dovetailed together, and if he announces that today, those will come in, and they're quite dramatic in many respects, even though it's only 1%, but I would say that's the big one. From an increasing income tax perspective, I would say you've just mentioned the fact that we've got the mineral windfall, if you want to call it that, but I think that we have to remember that it's a windfall, but we were short in budget last year. We had the pandemic, and if we take ourselves back to 2020 pre-pandemic, we're merely catching up. These windfalls are merely windfalls on a budget which was, as you said, short. So where are we going to get the money from to fulfill the SONA requirements, or the things that were announced, the infrastructure, the assisting small businesses, various other things that were announced, but the infrastructure is one of the big ones. So where is that going to come from? And we have very limited tax opportunity because we have very few taxpayers in this country. If one takes the individual taxpayers, and they've just brought out the SARS stats, we've got just over 5 million, or had in 2020, I believe it's gone down further, 5 million taxpayers in South Africa who are individuals, and around about 195,000 companies, of which 175,000 have taxable income less than 2.5 million rand. So they are neither here nor there. Your majority of your tax take, almost 38%, comes from individuals, and of those, you've got anybody who are earning more than 500,000 rand, which isn't a big amount, even though it is to a lot of people in this country. You've got 1 million people. That represents 0.16 of our population, and this may have reduced, by the way, since 2020, because these are based on 2020 figures. 0.16% of the population paying 72% of the personal income tax, which represents 38% of the total tax take for that year. So we've got very little room to move. But I do have a theory, and I don't know if you want me to go there, on where he could. So we looked out, so as I walked in earlier, the EFF or whoever it was that was there had their posters talking about we want wealth taxes. And quite frankly, a wealth tax is not practical at all. We don't have the administrative capacity within SARS. It's very easy to manipulate. The instance of value is very hard to determine when the wealth hasn't been realized. We have wealth taxes. We have estate duty, donations tax, STT, and transfer duty. So how do we look to the wealthy for taxes, but not necessarily in the form of a wealth tax, in order to alleviate the poverty and fulfill these needs that we have? And one of the suggestions could be, and I'm not saying he's taken it, I have no insight into the budget at all, but we could have looked at the rest of the world, and one of the places is Mauritius. They have a solidarity levy, much like we had in the early 90s. And that could be placed at a fairly high level, say above 1 million rand, above 5 million rand, above 750,000 rand taxable income, plus dividends. Because if you put a levy on taxable income, as in remuneration and rental, you can't not put it onto dividends, because you wouldn't have neutrality, because obviously the income tax and dividends rate is designed to more or less equal the marginal tax rate, which is 45%. So if you put one on, and it would also cover the people who are wealthy in the sense that they have shares rather than. So yes, that's where I think he could, if he's looking for a windfall, get it.
I'm going to be reminded by my father later that I failed economics 1 at university. So there are clever ways to do it, let me put it like that. If we were to reduce corporate tax, as you suggest, would that necessarily have a big impact? I mean, the argument always goes, if you have lower taxes, more people are employed. That's the argument from the right. The argument from the left is, well, actually, you need to make sure that we reduce our staggering levels of inequality. In your view, I mean, do you accept the argument that if we have lower taxes, particularly on corporations, we're going to see more people being employed?
Gosh, that's a very good question. A 1% decrease isn't going to have a significant impact, in my view. But the point is that we're saying, let's reduce the tax rate, and there was a suggestion that it would be reduced further. So a more significant reduction in tax rates might have a greater impact. Remembering, however, that small companies, those that have turnover up to 20 million, already are on a special basis. They have a sliding scale up to in fact, they never pay 28% actually because of the sliding scale. But they start paying 28% at, I think, 750,000. So the 1% won't make a big difference, but it shows willing to reduce the tax rates, which makes our country more attractive in the long term to companies that are saying, okay, well, we could be looking at South Africa, we could be looking at Mauritius. I mean, obviously there's a lot of other factors. Things that businesses look at I mean, tax is very low down on the list, as you're probably trying to allude to. You've got what are the quality of the people, what is the political stability, what is the level of corruption, lower corruption, more investment, so things like that. But nevertheless, the tax will be a factor because they're all looking for a return on investment, so it'll help.
It's interesting, Xolani, because the Minister seems to be under quite a lot of pressure from, I'll call them the left for now, various factors in his own party and in other parties, to do something dramatic, and in a way that always comes back to taxing the rich.
Yes, we are never going to hear the end of this. For some reason, many South Africans believe that we are not taxing the rich enough. Then the question is, who are the rich? 295,000 people in this country out of an odd 57 million actually earn more than R1 million. So those people already feel overburdened by paying tax. That group of people feel, yes, we could pay 1% more, but we've got organizations that are coming up that are saying that we should boycott some taxes because of how government has mismanaged funds and while we have landed up with the State Capture Commission one after the other. So once we deal with the corruption side of things and people don't feel used and abused as the taxpayers, they will feel much more happier, if I can use that word, when it comes to paying tax, to actually do so. But for another thing that is quite important is that this country is one, we are sitting in a country that is, I don't know if the professor is going to agree with me on this one, but we're sitting in a country that is in a continent that is among the highest taxed in the world. So those people have a point when they say that we need to look at the taxes that we are paying right now. So it's a very important one, and I don't know if he can do anything today. I don't expect him to do anything today. As the professor said, it's been 2 years. He could just kick the can down the road.
Kicking the can down the road's worked very well for many politicians for many years when it comes to matters of tax. Xolani Mbanjwa, he's stuck with me, I'm afraid, for the rest of the day. Don't tell him. Professor Deborah Tickle, a professor of tax at the University of Cape Town. Thank you very much indeed.